Welcome to Walker Tea Review. I'm Jason Walker, and if you've been here before, you notice that I usually go through a pretty regular routine of different aspects of tea, but it doesn't always apply. It can't always be done with every tea. So we're going to be doing things a little bit differently today because we have a special guest, this being a nice pu'er, a sheng pu'er. So this is going to give us an opportunity to talk a little bit more about pu'ers, and so let's just kind of go through the process itself. If you, for example, if you have a pu'er cake, this is this particular example. Let me go ahead and just introduce this tea as we start off. This is from ChinaChaDao. That is a store that you'll find on eBay. This is their ZhiMingDu is the name of the company. This is their ZhiMingDuLaoBanZhangSheng is the type of tea. The characters you see here in the middle. And then this is a sheng pu'er, a raw pu'er. Shengs are used with closer to a green leaf. They get piled up. There's a bit of a fermentation, aging process in which they can stay in a pile. They get spread out a little bit so that the mold doesn't grow, and they get placed back into a pile, and this process can get repeated, and there's some aging. And finally, the teas get pressed into a cake, which is what I have here. Now let's talk about what happens when you go through a cake. Well, a 100 gram cake like this one is retailing for $36.99, 37 bucks. We know that this tea was a 2009, which would be the time when it was pressed into a cake, not necessarily reflecting how much time was put into that piling method. So let's talk a bit about this tea and how we can approach it. First off, I prefer to go very delicately on the outside wrapper because, for one thing, there is some useful, valuable information oftentimes in the Chinese writing, the labeling here, packaging here. So I'm going to set that aside, just out of the way. Kind of look at one of the things I want to do is I want to look at some of this information here. Now it's in Chinese, but there's still some notes that you can make out. For example, there's a 2008 here. So this tells that and then there's also a 2007 number here. You could, for example, do a little bit of research, use a simple translation package, and find out a little bit of information about what those two dates represent. Likely, they're going to represent something as far as, like I said, that piling process or a harvest period. Okay, not all packages, not all kinds of teas necessarily will present all the information in the same way. So that's why I'm not really going into a lot of detail as far as what those particular numbers mean. It may not always be a repeatable process for you and a particular pu'er. One of the things you do want to note when you get a green pu'er, a sheng pu'er like this, is just that smell. There's a spicy, wet hay kind of element to it, just quite unique. For many people, it's either an immediate attraction or it puts them off pretty quickly. But inside of a cake like this, the other things you're going to note are that there are different leaf colors. There are some silvery white colors here. So I guess this is a point where we want to talk a little bit about the dry leaf. You're getting darker to grayer, silvery to a goldish type color, and that's part of the aspect of creating good pu'ers. Is you're making a recipe of different types of leaves, slightly different types of leaves. Again, this particular tea comes from a specific location, and that is from Yunnan province in China, southwest areas. Be thinking of closer to Tibetan mountain range. Be thinking about this is where some of the oldest tea trees are known to exist. What else? You want to talk about, because you want to talk about these teas represent recipes, combinations of leaves from different trees put together in a way that's going to age and flavor well. Other things you're going to note about a cake or a disc like this is, you can't see this one that well, but underneath here there is a label which is another added note of helps to confirm authenticity. The inside will often, of your packaging here, wrapper will often have a label as well. So I'm kind of keeping my eye on the time here. As far as actually breaking this up, a lot of people will tell you to avoid just kind of wedging off a piece like that. In order to keep your leaves more intact, the better approach is to take a narrow knife or a letter opener type, work the tip down in here, and try to, let me find a better spot here, try to wedge it into an upper and lower layer. Let's see if we can do some of that here. Just kind of working my leaf, my blade here in between, trying to gently work some off. So far so good. And while I'm doing this, I'm actually going to go ahead and start my water. I'm going to need to heat my water and have it close to ready when I'm ready to add my leaves in. So let me turn that on for a second. Now I've got enough here that I've loosened up. So I'm just going to kind of keep twisting my knife so that I can lever that up. If I were really careful, I want to pull more than break off. I'm going to separate that part as well. Now I've got a layer here. It was close to the label, so now there's a little bit of the label exposed here. I'm going to add this into my cup. That should be a good amount. That should be plenty with a 4-ounce guy wine like this. I'm going to add my water. While it's gotten still at a rolling boil, roaring there. I'm going to make sure that I add enough to cover that and loosen that up. Plenty. That looks good. Now, given that this is a cake and it's pressed and it's a pour, the first steeping will generally not be the best representation of what this tea offers. But the advantage is that a green tea like this, a tea like a pour like this, steepings are going to, you're going to be plenty of steepings to taste on again and off again. So you could get up to, depending on how good the tea is, the cake is, you can get 5 or more steepings. I'm wrapping this up pretty carefully. A sheng pour like this is the kind that can age and become increasingly valuable over time. So let me set this down. Okay. ChinaChaDao's website also mentions that this tea has a strong qi element, which, according to Chinese tradition and Chinese medicine, also this tea is beneficial in summer times. It gives a cooling sensation to it. Now our leaf here has loosened up quite a bit. It's not fully separated from that large flake type piece that I put in, but there's quite a bit of color coming off in there, so I believe I'm ready to pour now. So I'm going to carefully take the edges here, because I've still got plenty of liquor there, and I'm going to pour quickly to keep that liquor away from my fingertips and get it into my pitcher as easily as possible without spilling. Now, I'll come back and talk about this liquor, because that's already got a nice intense smell. Let's go ahead and talk about it from the wet leaf perspective here. First thing that hit me is this tea is the kind that would, if you are a cigar smoker, there's something in this tea that's just coming out and says, smoke a cigar while you drink this. This is just, there's a kind of a green tobacco-y type smell coming off this. Think about lightly colored, more lightly colored cigars. There's a little bit of a wet hay component, but that has that's mellowed out because this tea is aged, and teas like this are the ones that you want to get around 70% humidity generally. You want to keep them in a cool, dark place, and you want to let these age and develop character. Okay. Looking at these leaves, though, let's do some of that now. This one has not yet come apart, but this is one of those larger sizes. As we said, recipes involve leaves of different size and or tree origin. So I'm not going to be able to unfurl that one well. This is actually going to gently come across, but I'm not going to dig at it too much. That's a leaf that's folded in half down the middle, a nice olive green color. You do have some needles as well, long, a little bit of a brownish tip to it, tinge to it. Here's a set, a tip with a leaf, paler in color. Generally, as these age, they get darker brown. They get a smoother feel to the liquor, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So yes, looking at this tea, just from a glance, this would look like a green tea from a larger leaf, later harvest type of green tea, but we know better. So I'm going to set that aside. These leaves are, for the most part, like I said, full. There's needles. There's a variety of shapes in there. They don't look mistreated, torn, ragged, rough. So that looks like a good indicator right so far. Let's go to this liquor. Now I've let this liquor steep long enough that it's become a light honey, kind of a straw type color. Paler than beer, lighter than most beers, but you're coming off. You're still getting some of that wet hay, kind of starchy. A little bit of a earth note coming out. There's a little bit of a wet soil element in this aroma as well. So let's give it a taste here. A younger tea, a younger Sheng tea, Sheng pu'er, can be quite astringent, quite off-putting. This one has had the time and has been treated well, so that it doesn't have a strong astringent element to it. Still probably more astringent than some, in comparison to your typical black tea. I would say it's gentler. It's actually gentler than that, than milder than that. What else? The taste of a very young green, a more raw type of green Sheng like this, is you're getting a lot of hay component. This one's toned down, smoothed out on that hay component. There is something kind of sweet, wet hay about this, but it's not that intense. This one's rounding the corner towards something more mature, something more smooth. Talking about qi, what is qi? Qi is the sense of energy that flows through living creatures in Chinese medicine and traditional philosophy. There's something that just flowing through my head right now that just raise the alertness level one increment level, one notch, you know. So there is something that just kind of creates more alertness. For some people, this turns into a light sweat that dissipates, and then immediately it starts to cool the body. That's something that you may note if you're in tune with that element of qi in your body, in your life. If you're not, and you want to focus more on the aftertaste, this one goes a little bit more towards something a little bit of a mineral aspect, something of a little bit of a limestone type, shale type mineral, like seashell, or something in there like the calcium aspect in that. Combine that with again a light amount of wet, not wet hay, but straw. So this tea, I look at this tea and I say this tea has made that transition, or is rounding the curve from truly raw, rugged, to something that's becoming smooth, refined, nuanced, intense, really. This one is the kind that you would want to consider setting on the shelf and experimenting with aging, if you know what you're doing, because it can be quite an investment. If not, this one is a good introductory to the different steps and ages of tea. So I'm going to give this tea a 92, and I hope that you can find something that you appreciate in it. Come back and join us, learn more about pu'ers and other kinds of teas here at Walker Tea Review.